Good evening, everyone. My name is Keith Bryant, and I am the president of the San Diego Association of Black Journalists. And welcome to Be Safe Out There, Advocating for Your Safety. And so our organization wanted to put on this event to really help educate our journalists about safety in the field, especially in these trying times, especially with what has happened recently with the murders in Tijuana in January and with that MMJ getting hit by a car earlier this year. And so we want to bring awareness to that because there have been some concerns of safety, and it can go for anything from protests to covering a crime scene, even maybe a wildfire. So we have a panel of experts and great journalists to talk about this event. So I'm going to hand it over to Kirsten.
Hey everybody, I'm Kirsten Holmes. I'm the weekend anchor for CBS 8 reporter. And, like a lot of people, I'm an MMJ too. I think that's the future of the business. And I think a lot of us are equipped to know how to do all of it ourselves, one man band. So I spent 5 years as an MMJ at one station in Shreveport, Louisiana. That was a couple of years ago. So I definitely have a great understanding of how difficult it may be to MMJ and how intimidating it may be to really understand how to advocate for yourself. But I will tell you, like I'll tell anybody, learning how to advocate for yourself as early as you can in your career, especially when it comes to something as important as your safety, is going to be one of the fundamental stepping stones for knowing how to advocate for yourself effectively as you continue throughout your career. Because MMJing is probably going to be here for a while. So if you get enough practice in on advocating for yourself, letting news directors, assignment desk people, letting everyone know where you're comfortable with or what you're comfortable with, it'll get easier over time. Because I know I was that young, ambitious reporter. It's scary to try to tell them, wait, hold up, think a little bit more about me, because a lot of us are really ambitious. So we just want to get the job done, but we also want to go home at the end of the day too. So we got to make sure that we are all going home at the end of the day. So I'm going to introduce a couple of our panelists right now. We have Danielle Gill. She's the news operations manager for NBC7 San Diego. Thank you so much for having us or joining us, Danielle. We also have Mikey Dameron. He's a photojournalist at KPBS. Hey, Mikey. We have Nia Watson, reporter and MMJ extraordinaire at ABC 10. We also have David Hernandez, reporter for crime, law enforcement, and the safety beat for the San Diego Union-Tribune. And we have Chris Price, San Diego County Sheriff's Department. And we also have DJ Jamsetjee. I'm going to say it slowly, so I at least say all of the syllables from the San Diego Police Department. So we have a really well-rounded panel from law enforcement, MMJs with a lot of practice, and news operations managers, news managers to help us have this conversation, have an effective conversation so that we can equip everyone with what they need to know so that they can advocate for themselves in the field. All right, so I'm going to start off by throwing the question out there. Let's start with Nia. What is the biggest hurdle you think journalists face when it comes to advocating for their own safety? And how did you overcome that?
Well, just a little background on me. I started as a photographer, photojournalist in Montgomery, Alabama. Then shortly, about less than a month, I became an MMJ in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. In college, they taught us you're gonna have to do everything on your own. So I was doing live shots on my own in college, everything on my own. So when I got in the real world, I got out there in the real world, I was like, oh, this is nothing. I can do this. But early on, you just have so much drive and you don't want to disappoint people. Like you want to show that you're a go-getter. So you're afraid to say, okay, I don't feel safe, or you're afraid to say, I can't do this, or you're afraid to walk in and they're disappointed for some reason. I mean, you're a hard worker, so you have that mentality. But a lot of MMJs are getting burnt out in this industry, and that's because they aren't advocating for themselves right off the bat. And I learned early on, I'm like, no. So me advocating for my safety led to me advocating for if I'm stretched too thin and I'm pressured and I feel stressed and I feel like I can't do my job at the quality I know I can do it. So it just helped me advocate for myself in general as an MMJ. Coming from Myrtle Beach, it's a really small market. So I did my own live shots. Here, coming to San Diego, of course, it's considered a large market, so we never go live on our own. But in Myrtle Beach, I was setting up live shots, and if I didn't feel safe, I don't know. It was just something in me that I'm like, no, I don't think this is working out. And they were really understandable. They were like, okay, do it look live? Or I remember I was doing, I forgot what the story was about. Oh, elderly man died in this, and he was from this well-known neighborhood. And I went in the neighborhood, and it was this really weird guy just giving me this crazy, very uncomfortable look. And of course, I'm by myself and everything like that. I'm like, I don't like how he was just staring at me like he did not have good intentions. So I called really quick to my managers and I said, hey, I don't feel comfortable in this neighborhood. And they were like, leave, just get out of there. So I learned very early on to speak up for yourself. Here, the managers honestly are amazing at ABC 10 News. Like, even if I'm MMJing and they feel like it's not a safe situation, they'll pair me up with a photographer, to the point where I don't have to advocate as much for myself. I know smaller markets, less resources, you're stretched thin, but I learned very on just to go ahead and say, hey, I'm unsafe. And that really gives you the courage to advocate for other things as an MMJ.
Thank you for that candid response. You know, it is scary. I know I'm sometimes I still get a little nervous when I ask for what I need, but it's that ambition, that drive that's like, oh, I want to please my employer. So I don't want to be a burden to them. And sometimes you feel like a burden when you're asking for what you need. All right, so I'm gonna throw it over to Danielle Gill. She's a news operations manager. Give us some tips on how reporters, when they're young and ambitious and they want to just get it done, what are some tips that you found that leads to success for people to advocate for themselves, their safety, and still get the job done?
Yeah, I mean, I'm relatively new to being operations manager, to being a first time manager starting in September. So before, I was a younger journalist, doing things that probably were not the safest. And so for me, I want people to come up and say, speak plainly, call a thing the thing, if you're not feeling safe, say that. I tell my folks now that if you are in a situation that you're unsafe, you leave and then you can call me. So if you need to leave, okay. I mean, I'm not out there, you're out there. That's the first, kind of order of business. No story is worth your safety. Also it's also on managers too to ask the questions, because people want to do a good job and feel pressure in their job to make sure that, hey, this might not be the best idea. Let's pair you up with somebody, or let's not do this at all. So it's also on us to do that as well.
I appreciate that. And, hopefully throughout everyone's career, they'll find that it gets easier depending on the market, and hopefully even in the smaller markets, that it's easier to advocate for yourself, because it's in those smaller markets that the resources are thinner and it may be a little more difficult. But I think if we look at those obstacles as opportunities, maybe we can turn the tide for safety. All right, Mikey, I'm gonna come to you because you're like the photojournalist. You've been out here for a while. What are some of the ways that you have seen that are most effective for yourself or other journalists to really advocate for themselves? Because I really want to make sure we drive this home. Is there anything that you want to add to that conversation before we go over to law enforcement?
And, my background's a little different because I spent 10 and a half years as a military photographer also. So I'm not, being in combat situations, I've had training. So it's a little bit different for me. And you're right, go to piggyback on what you guys said about young journalists. I think it would help to pair them up with a veteran photographer sometimes, make them check their temperature. Hey, slow down. I look young reporters in the face and be like, we're not doing that. We're just not doing that. I'm not going to I'm not going to let you get yourself hurt as well as me. And I live by that. We left the station together. I'm going to return you in the same state that we left this as. And like I said, no story is worth, your safety. We'll figure it out some type of way. And also just information, as much information we need before we leave to go out into that story. If I know we're going somewhere that might be shady, let's think about different ways that we can convey that, or visually or whatever. Case in point, like, just I got sent out to, like, right after the riot in Washington, when they stormed the Capitol. They actually tried to send me to East County to interview people in East County about what happened in Washington. Me. That doesn't seem like a very good decision, especially, you know, with people's feelings being raw. It's just, you got to think about what, you know, the right person for the right job in the right situation. So a lot of that has to come into play. And like you said, you know, you just got to, you know, assess the situations. Is it worth it? You know, do we really need this story? Hey, slow down. You're moving too fast. You know, let's really step back and really look at what's going on.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. Sometimes, you know, I've been here for, it'll be a year in May, but one of the first conversations that news managers had with me was about the East County. So it's important that in our newsrooms that we're having those conversations, that sometimes this area may be problematic for certain people. And when we are doing our story selection and we're doing all these story pitches, that we consider that and make sure that this is the right person for that story, or send backup. I love the idea of pairing people up with a veteran journalist so that everyone can get seen. I know that we had someone has their hand raised. Is that Danielle?
It is. I just wanted to just kind of emphasize also situational awareness when I was listening to Mikey speak. And I'll tell you, before I came here, I used to walk, I worked in Washington, D.C., and I was attacked on the job. And I feel like that's important to, you know, with a reporter, we were in a story that, you know, it was a crime story. And we said, this isn't great. The manager was like, no, go ahead, just knock on the door. And we did. They came out and tried to get my camera, which I wasn't having. It actually went viral because I rolled on it. But anyway, so the station, I guess, was okay with it. But, you know, the reality of it is, you know, you have to have situational awareness and you have to say, I'm not doing that, you know, period. And you have to, and, you know, and that's it. Because at the end of the day, if you get hurt, the manager will be like, oh, well, you did it. Like, I don't, you know, you don't want, you know, that's not what you want. You want to be able to say, you know, you have to stand up for yourself, even at the early report. I know it's hard and I know it's difficult, but it's really important. You got to set the precedent now. No story is worth your safety.
I appreciate that. Mikey, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted two quick tips for any like MMJs or photographers out in town. And this shout out to you, Leo guys, too. Whenever you get to the scene, make sure you make contact with these guys. So one, they know that you're there. And two, they'll tell you exactly where it's safe and where not to be, and where it's not safe. And they'll put you in position. Those guys are there to help you get set up and, you know, get you all the information you need, but they're also there to keep you safe. So make sure you get in contact with these guys you ever see them on the scene. And two, get in the habit of not face in the eyepiece. That way you can see everything that's going on around you. And that happens a lot to people, you got to watch what's going on in the background behind your reporter. You know, the MMJs, that's how that, you know, that when MMJ got hit, she was looking in the lens, not seeing what's going on, and that car hit her. So, you know, in those situations, you really got to, you know, keep your head on the swivel, keep your head out of that camera as much as possible. That's why they make the flip out screens and stuff, so you can see it. You'll be fine. It's not, you know, messing with your cool image or whatever. You know, it's about your safety.
Danielle?
Well, you think after all this Zoom, I wouldn't have had myself on mute. I was just going to talk about situational awareness in terms of just, it's really more what Mikey is saying, just looking around, seeing who's around you, what's around you, what is happening, where are you in relation to, you know, for example, with the poor young lady got hit by the car, like she was in the street, you know, and she should have been further back, you know, away from the kind of all that action and behind the barrier, that sort of thing. Just being mindful of where you're at, what's going on in your surroundings and everything. And also, if you see officers, I used to work in DC, if they start leaving, well, then you need to leave too. I mean, so that's usually is a good rule of thumb too. You know, and a lot of times they would tell you like, this isn't great, we're leaving. I'm like, okay, well, we're all leaving. And so just, reach out to folks and just, let you know. And if you are an MMJ, also see if there are other MMJs to, kind of not team up in terms of, I know it can be competitive at times, but at least, you're kind of together in a group, especially if you're working at a night situation, at a crime scene or something.
That's really important. You got to be aware of where you are. I want to go to David Hernandez because we talk about this all the time in newsrooms. We even had this conversation today when we had a reporter meeting at CBS 8. We get the privilege of coming out with like a marked vehicle and a camera, so everybody knows exactly who we are, and sometimes that gives us a barrier to people asking, people coming at us a different type of way. But when you're print, how does that work, and how do you advocate for your safety when you're in the field and at the office?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything that you guys have said so far. Like I've had communication with my manager in some situations. It just so happens in East County as well, where she was the first to say, like, be sure to leave if you'd like to. But just to actually go into what you were talking about, in some ways, I think there is a little bit of an advantage in that sometimes as a print reporter, I don't have the camera. So I kind of try to decide whether to blend in or stand out depending on the situation. I think that's really important to keep in mind. Sometimes it's very important to have your press badge, for example, like very visible. Other times you have to kind of, I think it ties into the situational awareness as well, but kind of take the temperature of the room, and maybe it's best not to stick out so much depending on the situation. So yeah, I've been in a couple of scenes, for example, where like law enforcement, I was like technically inside of a scene that eventually became larger, yellow tape went around me. And so they were looking for a suspect. And so, it may sound silly, but I obviously didn't want to be, confused with a suspect where they were like totally locking down a scene, like no one was in the scene except, myself and maybe like a few other reporters. So I obviously wanted to make it known that I was a journalist. So I had my press badge out. Yeah, I would just also add that it's important to kind of, I know this was touched on as well, but keep an eye on the way that law enforcement is kind of assessing the situation. Obviously if they leave, I totally agree, it's a good idea to leave. If they're, circling in numbers, also be careful about that and what that may mean in terms of like the safety level of the scene. So I think, yeah, many scenes are so dynamic, but it's important to just try to kind of gauge how things evolve because they could change pretty quickly as well.
I appreciate you saying that. I was thinking that, and I think we discussed that a little bit in our meeting. It was like, we think the camera is a barrier or a safety barrier for us because it's like, oh, we with the TV station, but sometimes they be mad at the TV stations and they don't like us. And if you go in incognito and just like blend in, sometimes you get more of a feel for what the situation is. So I appreciate you saying that. Now we got to bring the Leos in because y'all been waiting patiently, and I already done messed up DJ's name. So we got to bring you guys in because we really, really need to hear from you. Sometimes we're in situations where you guys are there because it's already an active scene, and sometimes you guys are not there. We would love some tips on when we're out there, what are some, just like maybe both of you can share maybe 2 or 3 things. What are some situations that we need to look for here throughout San Diego County that can help us keep ourselves safe? If we see this, if we see that, some of us are new to the area, some of us have been here for a long time, other people are going to see this. Help us out. We'll start with you, Chris.
Well, basically, listening to you guys speak, I mean, as far as the definition of situational awareness, all of you have a very good grasp of the context of situational awareness as far as it pertains to your job. Mikey definitely does because he was in the military, so he's had probably a lot of the same training that we've had as far as, having a good understanding of the environment you're in, the dangers that whatever environment that you're in present, and and how to identify those things so that you can respond appropriately to them. It's generally for us, the media arrives to a lot of things before we do. And we understand that, while you guys have a mission, a vision, and an objective, as far as what you need to accomplish, it is a pretty normal thing to see that, some people, some MMJs, this is a new term to me as of today, Some MMJs have a tendency to place themselves in certain positions or certain areas where, you know, the danger is just as high to them as it is to us responding to it. And that's what we want to avoid. You know, there's this thing that we were taught in law enforcement. I'm sure DJ will know exactly what this is when I say it, and possibly Mikey too. There's this thing, it's an acronym. It's OODA. It's called the OODA loop. And, you know, the OODA loop stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. Excuse me. Yeah, decide and act, right? That was created by a pilot. And it's something that provides you with the tools that you need in order to identify to identify the inner workings of whatever environment that you're in, so you know how to respond to things. And it's just small things, even, I mean, things that you don't need to be like aspire in a paramilitary organization or law enforcement in order to do these things. And you guys spoke on a lot of the things that we do. You know, a lot of the techniques that we utilize when we go somewhere, that we have a basic understanding of hey, this area is kind of unsafe, or or certain people in certain parts of this area don't like us based on our profession. And that's a bigger thing. You know, you guys work quite a bit out of your vehicles, your own vehicles or company vehicles, right? So, you know, and I do this in my personal life, and, you know, it took a while for my wife to understand why I do it. Every single place that I go, to the store, to the bank, to any restaurant, I back in everywhere I go, every single place. I back in and I park in a place where if I need to leave in a hurry, I'm close to the nearest exit, to where I don't have to go through a bunch of people and a bunch of cars to get there. You know, and even when you guys respond to, you know, to scenes, or you're doing your job at night, you know, a lot of the same things still apply. You know, just parking and centrally locating yourself, you know, in a way where, you know, if you need to get away from something, if you need to get away from someone, you're in a place, you know, where you can do that in, you know, a very direct manner. You know, so we do the same thing everywhere we go. It's called, like, we have terms like tactical parking, where if we're going somewhere and we know that, you know, most of the time when we respond to something, the situation will change while we're responding to it. It'll start out as, like, example for as an argument, and then by the time we get there, it turned into a stabbing, right? And you know, we're just like, okay, this kind of changes, you know, the methods that we're going to use to respond to these people, because possibly someone's going to need medical aid. We don't know, you know, if the person responsible for the incident is still there, you know, all these things. You know, and the main objective is safety for all parties, right? And, you know, at the end of the day, we want to ensure that we go home. We want to ensure that you guys go home. Mikey hit on it very well. You know, we are absolutely there to look out for you guys. There's a gentleman, he works freelance. He primarily operates on YouTube. Really nice guy. You know I'm talking about, DJ. You've probably seen that guy. He really nice guy. He talks to us. He hangs out with us all the time. He lets us know he's there every time he's there. And, you know, recently, I believe it was last year, he got in a really bad car accident responding to something that we were involved in, you know, and we were all, you know, worried about him, trying to reach out to him, make sure that he was okay, you know. And I remember, I mean, doing this job, because I've been doing it for about 10 years, you know, he was there to a lot of stuff before we got there, you know, and he cares that much, you know, representing situations properly, you know. And so I commend you guys quite a bit, you know, because you guys go into these same situations that we go to, with limited amount of resources and less tools, right, and less people. So hopefully that kind of answered some of the questions here.
It did, and it kind of sparked a couple of new questions. So I'm gonna change the question up for you, DJ. You know, we covered the story. I think everybody covered the story about the journalists in TJ or Tijuana. That was scary. You know, when I called home and told my mom that I was covering a story about journalists being killed, My mom was in Arkansas and she was not happy about that. But we still have a job to do. What are some tips that you can provide us? We're advocating for our safety, but what are some tips that we can make sure we are keeping ourselves safe? Because a lot of us are forward facing or public facing people, and even those print journalists, not even necessarily public facing people, but their name was out there. Any quick tips? We got about 5 minutes left before we get to wrap up. Please share some tips that you can give us that we can equip ourselves with success to make sure we're making it home safe and we're waking up the next morning safely. Like, we want to continue to tell these stories and not have to fear retribution from somewhere else. Do you have anything you can add to that effect?
Yeah, absolutely. So situational awareness is always key when you're on the job and off the job. I know a lot of MMJs like to have that whole social media personality, being conscious on where you're consistently filming. Do you have a routine where you're at the gym every day at 10 a.m.? Are you filming in the gyms where I can tell what gym you're at that time every day? So if somebody wanted to inflict that harm, they know exactly where to find you. So it's changing your schedule, keeping it random, as well as when you drive home. A lot of us turn on autopilot mode and we're just cruising. We just go home, we're exhausted, but take a different route here and there, change it up. That's one of the best ways for your at-home security to make sure that, you do feel safer. Obviously, we always advocate for alarms and camera systems. My house has more cameras than Fort Knox personally, but that's how we do it over here as well on the PD side. I think Mikey and Chris both hit the head. Situational awareness is key on everything. If the hairs on the back of your neck are really standing up saying something's not right, something is not right. So definitely get out of there, call your manager. It's easier to cover a story from somewhere else and say be safe than to be in a sketchy situation. And unfortunately, more discussions end up happening like this, or you become a news article that you don't want to be a part of.
I appreciate that. All right, so it's 6:57. We are gonna kind of, those were my preset questions. I'd love if anybody had any follow-up questions that you want to have answered. We have the chat that you can send them directly to me if you don't want to ask them out loud in front of the group, or you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask those questions. But Mikey, you have such phenomenal experience. You just like in the military. What are some other ways that here in San Diego that we could do to advocate for ourselves? Because it's more than just going to our manager and saying, don't send me out to insert city name here on this race story. There are other things we can do while we're right here.
I mean, anybody that's been in town long, this place is not, it's big, but it's not huge. And if you've been in news over a year, 2 years in this town, you pretty much been to every place here, seen everything, or covered some kind of stuff. I know there's years I'll be like, didn't I just do this just like a couple of weeks ago? And it's just, it gets repetitive, but you get to know the city, and that's the biggest part. Just like the Leos have, studied the street names and, where they got to go. So if they respond to a call, you got to know the city like that. So, it's just, this part of town's not great. This part of town's fine. You start to know where the best spots or the safe spots or where it's going to be problematic, So also, like, it's just certain places like the beach, where there's a bunch of like drunk people hanging out. You really got to watch downtown Gaslamp. 9 times out of 10, if you're on a live shot, like I used to just step back before, like about 10 minutes out from our hit and just kind of watch the crowd, because usually the person that's going to do something stupid is hovering around and watching. And they're probably looking at your reporter, just like waiting for their chance to do something, because they're just waiting for that camera or the red light where they think in their mind is going to turn on, and that's going to be their national debut to whatever craziness they got on their mind. So you really have to watch hands, watch people, anybody just kind of lingering around for no reason. Like I said, just really just watching the background of what's going on around you. And another thing, like when we were talking about press passes, that's why I got this little armband right here, because the way our cameras are made, if we're holding the camera up, this is on my blind side and everybody can see who that is. And I'm just not some, like you said, a YouTube guy. They know it's real, like legit press. And it's not somebody that's on the scene, because like Chris and, DJ said, there's guys that we start recognizing, like the stringers and stuff. And there's also, you know, guys that are there to cause trouble. So, you know, you want to make, it's a fine line between showing who you are and like, you know, putting it out there that you are work for a legit news company. Like I rarely wear my KPBS stuff anymore unless I'm on a scene. I usually wear like neutral color black stuff, which can be, you know, dangerous because I almost got hit on a curb the other day by a guy. You know, I was on the side of the street filming, and people see cameras and they, you know, sometimes when they're driving, they just follow their eyes too. And he jumped the curb right behind me. And I was like, shit, maybe I should have had that vest on. But that's one of those things you really, if I wasn't paying attention, that could have been bad. So, you know, just like little things like that, you really want to pay attention to.
Danielle, I want to ask you a question before we go. Keith, I see you had your hand up. I'd love to.
Oh, yes. I had a question. Just from a producer's perspective, because sometimes, you know, I mean, what as, you know, people behind the scenes, producers could do to, you know, help keep, you know, journalists safe out in the field. Because sometimes, you know, there's breaking news. Oh, we want something visual, you know, you want something current, what's happening, especially for the morning hours, since I produced mornings for about 6 years. So what could, you know, producers do to help improve your safety or, you know, help, you know, keep you safe in the field?
Is that for me or?
For anyone who wants to answer that.
I mean, you just, you know, you're in the IFB, so just talk to your people. How's it look out there? As it look crazy? It looks crazy in the camera. Do we need to move? Just be flexible. I know, you know, difference between a good producer and a bad producer is one that can't flow the story, right? They're just, you're stuck on this and then we're stuck in this circumstance. So just, you have to be, you know, on your feet, just like we are. If we got to move, we got to move. You know, it's a lot easier for us now because we're not putting up masks or anything. So it's just a backpack now. You can just flip a switch, throw it in the car and get out of there, where it used to be, you have to wait for this mask to drop. And depending on how old that truck is, that could be 10 minutes. And you can't get away from whatever danger. Yeah, and then you're also tethered to the truck. So I'm glad the technology, especially I guess through COVID, has really changed from people working remotely, and everybody's just been using the remote backpacks and stuff. So that's been easier to get in and out of situations.
Yes, it has been. Danielle, before we kind of wrap up, I got to ask you, you know, we all came up with this, oh, you know, talk to your managers. That's in a perfect world where your managers are able to receive that. I like to talk about some of those imperfect worlds where you try to speak up for yourself or advocate for your own safety, and you get more pushback than you are comfortable with. What should we as news gatherers do in that situation? Because it's already scary to speak up in the first place, and then to get pushback. What's our next course of action?
You know, that's a good question. You know, I mean, honestly, I can just speak for myself, and I'm sad for journalists who have to face that. You know, first I'll, you know, start with that. You know, at the end of the day, you have to look at yourself in the mirror, right? And you have to defend your own safety. And it may not be pretty, and you may get pushback on it. And you know, you have to. Your safety is number one. I don't care what anybody else says. You know, that's the reality of the situation. You need to go home to your people, your family at the end of the day. Bottom line, period. Your manager may not like it, and that makes me sad. You know, hurts my heart. But your safety is number one. And you know, you need to start looking for another job. I mean, if it's honestly, if they don't respect you enough to talk, you know, to when you're saying, hey, you know, there's always some folks, you know, that are kind of problems, right? You know, there's everybody who's got some folks. But if you're just saying, like, if you're, you know, like most folks, and you're like, this isn't safe, and you're getting pushback on that, I think it's time to start looking for a place, you know, because that's not how it should be, and that's not how places operate. And take it to HR, somebody wrote over.
Love it. That's good, Donna. That was like, shoot, I'm going straight to HR. Play with me if you want to. All right. So do we have any of them? I'm going to read that out loud. Take it to HR. Folks inside don't know what folks in the field deal with. And that is true. Sometimes you have people that sit behind a desk all day. They don't really have that understanding of what it is in the real world. Oh, everybody got their hands up now. Hey, everybody, y'all participate now. David, we'll start with you.
I was just going to add, I think we've touched on it a little bit, but just to make it clear, and I don't know how it is for everyone else, like I'm kind of in a fortunate spot in that like I keep quite a good amount of gear in my car. Most of it, thankfully, that's what I was getting at. My employer gave it to me, but it's also just so important because you never know what equipment you're going to need in what situation or where you're going to be sent, redirected if a fire breaks out near a bunch of homes, or something like that. So I would say like advocate for gear. And I mean, I would honestly put the onus on newsrooms and managers to provide that gear. I mean, I don't think it should be up to reporters to have to like, essentially request that gear, but if that's not happening, obviously do so. So I have everything from like a orange vest, a helmet, so things like that, fire gear, and other gear for a crime scene. So I just wanted to highlight the importance of having like gear.
We call that stay ready so you ain't got to get ready where I'm from. So I appreciate that. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off of what Danielle, David said, at the end of the day, the person there's only one person that can have your best interest at heart, and that's you. So sadly, you guys have to deal with stuff like that. I mean, in our line of work, we're all very, very motivated and, prideful when it comes to us doing our job. And sometimes we have to put that aside, and remember that we do have families that care about us, that want to see us in one piece. And, sometimes we have to let this person get away, because the dangers that are involved with trying to apprehend this person are just too great. David's very, very, he's pretty much in the right line of thinking, that he needs to be, especially nowadays. There's something that he said about having gear, having medical equipment, having an IFAC, having, fire gear. That's pretty cool, and things like that, because I'm sure a lot of you saw, during the riots and the civil unrest, there was a story that I saw where there was an anchor person. I believe this happened somewhere in Portland. I think it was in Portland. The cameraman that was with the the mobile journalist he was trained in the military. He used to I don't want to get his job wrong, so I'm just going to leave that part out. But he saw some people in the immediate area where they were, they were looting, and these people turned their attention toward a police vehicle that was parked on the street, and these people started vandalizing the vehicle. They got inside the unit, and they got a hold of whatever officer that was gear, including a rifle. And because that particular gentleman just happened to be military trained, and he had that warrior mindset, similar to a few of us in here, he was able to address that before that person had the opportunity to do whatever it was they were thinking with that gear, and it ended, in a way that was non-violent, thankfully, but once again, that sadly, that particular situation, civil unrest, rioting, that's something we're going to revisit. It's just going to happen, and it's just a matter of how you're going to prepare for it and how you're going to approach it, and how, you're going to, how the level of safety that you choose to utilize and how important it is to you individually, because everybody here is clearly very passionate about what it is that they do, and it'd be a shame to see anybody get hurt by some knucklehead somewhere, in this, while you're trying to do your job, so like I said, pretty much everybody in here is on the right track and saying all the right things. I think if me, Mikey, or DJ, we could add little things, but it sounds like everybody in here, that is talking has a lot of experience, based on what they've done so far, so the things to look for, and what what to look for, people's body language, not, nonverbal cues, and, and how the environment's speaking to you. You guys are on the right track, and I'm just sitting here listening. So
that positive reinforcement is good to hear. I'm a little bit safer now. I was like, oh, okay, I'm good. I need to back in. I thought I just learned that from the hood, but no, that helps everywhere. Yay, from my upbringing. All right. So we got DJ, we got Nia, and we got Mikey. Nia, I'm gonna get you because I haven't heard from you in a while, and then we'll go down the line. I just appreciate y'all, first of all, with the participation. Thank you. It's better when people participate. We'll start with you, Nia.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it's important to speak up for the situations, during situations that aren't so obvious when it comes to being like unsafe. We're in the time of COVID. Listen, it was the time where I was like, I'm not going to knock on that door. I don't know what's going on in that house. So, and they would send me to a neighborhood to probably like get reaction from people in the neighborhood about something going on. Where before, COVID, I would knock on the door and say, hey, we're talking about this, but now I try to catch people outside in the yard or something like that. Or if they send you to like a mass gathering and it's the height of COVID, I would say I don't feel comfortable going there. Maybe I'll shoot across the street, pan a little bit, zoom in or something like that. But learn how to speak up even in situations that aren't so obvious when it comes to being unsafe. I think that's extremely important as well. I remember one time, like when in my first or second market, I think Danielle, you spoke about this too. It was just like a car accident, and I went to knock on homes. Luckily, I was with my photographer, but I didn't know the home, and a little girl unfortunately died. I didn't know the home that I was knocking on was the parents of the little girl. And so when I knocked on the door, the father just came at me. And my photographer stepped in front of me and was like, whoa, wait a minute. And so then the mom was like, I'm so sorry, we just lost our baby and stuff like that. So I didn't know coming in. I just saw a car accident. I was like, let me knock on doors. But those situations where you don't really know how the outcome is going to be, and the situation where it's not safe is not so obvious, I think that's very important as well.
I appreciate that. That's real. Thank you for that, Nia. Mike, I know you got that hard out at 7:15.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of, the gear aspect of it. And, like I have a go bag, which is probably not a surprise to Chris or DJ. And it's got everything from, I got at least 3 different kind of knives in there, power bars, bottles of water, a medical kit, anything that I think that I might need if I get stuck out somewhere, my car breaks down, or anything that I might need during the day. And also, with managers and stuff, you really got to know your people, know what they're capable of, what they might or might not do. And as for photographers, know your reporters also. I was walking through the newsroom the other day, and I know a certain reporter was being sent up to the snow, and she had on a maxi dress and some flats. And I know that she had drove down from Temecula. So I just looked at her and I was like, yeah, okay. And I called her photographer today and was like, hey man, you need to call your boss and talk to them about what she's got on. There's no way she can go up in the snow looking like that. And they didn't even know what the snow chains were anyway. So I was like, you definitely don't need to go up there like that. So, and that's going back to being able to talk to your supervisor and be like, hey, we are not ready for this. We don't have the equipment. We are not ready to go. We're looking at putting her in danger, and whatever else might be happening to that. So that's something that you need to speak up, and the information flows up and down with managers and people that work with for them. So, like I said, information is key, and gear. If you're a reporter and you don't have a bag with you, even though you might think that photographers got all the stuff, tech stuff, reporters need stuff too. And you got to be ready for anything that happens, because you never know. Like you said, you might be at a city council meeting and then get switched to a fire. And there's really not that much time to pivot, to go home, get your stuff. I got boots and stuff in the car. You just got to be ready. So as my old reporter used to call me, the last Boy Scout. Well, we was always ready for action. We could go anywhere, no matter what. So Guys, it's been great. Like I said, I have to run. Hope, Leo guys, hope to see you or not see you on the street. That's a toss up of how it goes either way, right? So it's good to see everybody else. I'll see you guys out there.
Thank you, Mikey.
Bye.
Bye, Mikey. It was
All
great
right,
having you.
DJ.
See you later.
So I just want to piggyback off what Chris was talking about with civil unrest. Make sure everyone's familiar with Senate Bill 98. Essentially, that's what amended the law to allow MMJs and press behind the police lines, where it's a little bit more safer, a little bit more controlled. But also make sure you maintain that situational awareness while you're still behind the police lines. Because as we saw many times around the country, thankfully we never really saw it here, those police lines could be completely disseminated within seconds. So also value and talk, if something happens, say the crowd rushes us, do we leave our cameras behind? Do we grab them? You got to evaluate that with your photog if you have them with you. What's our next options? Where do we go if the crowd comes from this direction? Can we go here? Because there could be times where our line completely disintegrates and we have to regroup ourselves. We're not thinking much about where's the media behind our line as well.
Danielle.
Well, I was not going to, originally I was going to talk about something else, but you just mentioned the civil unrest. And before I came here, I was at NBC in Philadelphia, and we had the civil unrest hit us hard. I mean, it was, 2 days after they burned down, seemed like every strip mall in the city of Philadelphia. And, it was during the day, and I've covered this stuff before. Been shooting 20 years, and all of a sudden it was not fun. It was like during the day, it was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It was still light outside. And, my manager was watching live because I had my live view on my back, and I heard my phone ring, and he was like, "You gotta get out of here!" Like, and that's on the, I say that because it's also on managers to be like, okay, that turned, and for me, I was like, well, I'm gonna keep. This is happening. We're gonna keep doing it. He's like, no, so I guess make managers more accountable. And I also want to talk about like the practice that we have at NBC7 and Telemundo 20 is not to have MMJs to do door knocks on victims and potential suspects, or anything really that could put you at potential risk. I mean, if you're just asking around folks to about cute story or something about sweet girl got A's in school, I mean, I'm sure it's a relatively low risk activity, but if anybody for victims and stuff, that can turn ugly very fast as well as suspects.
Yeah, that when you were talking about that, I remember that scene where I forget his name. The reporter from CNN was arrested on camera, and someone else had mentioned like, "Oh, they bum rush, the line. Do we take our camera? Make it home safely. That camera footage can stay right there. You are the top priority, not the content. At that time, you get yourself home." All right, Chris.
Is just one more comment. So we had a little bit of dialogue on gear. Gear is important. Gear is useless if you don't know how to use it. So, if it's little things like, having a first aid kit, having fire gear, like David said, and things like that. You want to be an asset to yourself. You want to be an asset to those around you. I don't know how it works as far as what news station you work for, if they're willing to send you guys to training, or a lot of places offer CPR training and basic first aid for a lot of their employees. If you don't know that stuff, seek out the training. It's out there. It's plentiful. Most of the time you can look stuff up on YouTube if you just want basic things, but a lot of retired law enforcement, active duty law enforcement, former corpsmen in the military, firemen, retired firemen, EMS, there's a lot of training, a lot of knowledge out there. Additionally with, the civil unrest, and all these things that we're talking about that, we might revisit, and including the, events that we were speaking on earlier in Mexico, if you have the equipment to help somebody, if you have the ability to help somebody, absolutely, help somebody. If you have the equipment, but you don't have the training, then the equipment's useless. And we're held at a high standard, you know, myself and DJ, you know, we have to, you know, maintain the level of training on a lot of, I think just about every article of equipment that we carry every single year. And it's because this information is always changing, you know, it's, you know, and it just kind of is what it is. You know, I carry, I think probably about 3-4 first aid kits in my own personal car, you know, in my truck. And I have enough tourniquets and rat tourniquets for just about every passenger in my vehicle, you know, and that's not that I'm going out thinking that, hey, you know, I'm going to get into a shooting or something like that. I'm not thinking like that. What if, you know, we get into a car accident? You know, I have kids in the car quite a bit, you know, and, you know, God forbid I have to use that equipment, but I've come across things, you know, and, you know, when I'm off, car accidents, you know, and I've had to pull out some recovery gear and, you know, help pry a door open to get somebody out of the car, you know, so it's, you know, just, you guys keep yourself safe, you know, but at the same time be an asset to each other, you know, in the event things happen, you know, because they absolutely do.
What did I say earlier? I didn't say it twice now. Stay ready, so you ain't got to get ready. I appreciate that. You always have to stay prepared. Okay, we're going to take the last two hands, and then we going to wrap up. It's dinner time, y'all. All right, so I think I'm going to go with ladies first. Danielle.
I was just gonna say too. I mean, you're talking about gear. There's, I mean, and we have these, you know, two officers here. Just about, you know, having some of the gear, but does that make you more of a target? I know one of the things we had in Philadelphia, like we felt some kind of way that we didn't have helmets or whatever, or you know, bulletproof jacket. And Philadelphia's, you know, it's tough. I mean, out here, and but at the same time, does that draw that kind of the wrong kind of attention? I guess, you know, at the same time. As my newsreader at the time said, if you got to use that kind of stuff, you should not be there, I guess, in the first place. But I don't know what your guys' opinion. You know, should we have that kind of stuff and get that kind of training, or just like, if you need that stuff, we shouldn't be fooling around with that kind of. I just wanted to get your guys' opinion.
This is why we got the right people. We got the right people on this. Let's ask this question. It's a good question.
Yeah, I'll take that answer. It's very much about reading your crowd. You know, if you're running into a hot active shooter situation, one, your guys' safety is number one. Back out of there. If it's still like a warm zone, if you have the equipment, I would say put it on, make yourself readily identifiable as press. But then the other thing about first aid kits, for me, every car that I'm ever in has some form of an active shooter kit ready to go. It's a sad reality we live in now that we need to be prepared for an active shooter anywhere and everywhere, both as when I'm in the uniform and when I'm on my plain clothes. So everyone that I'm with always knows where my active shooter kit is and what I would need from it right away. And whether that's a little bit of a paranoia mindset of thinking, when is this going to happen? But everyone should be prepared and take some form of a TCCC course, which is a tactical combat casualty course, which gives you that quick first aid and lets you kind of see from our perspective what happens during an active shooter. Because you never know where you'll be. Like we said earlier, sometimes the media beats us to these calls. You know, are you going to be sitting there when you're hearing the gunshots going off? If you can hear the gunshots and you don't have the equipment like we do, you're too close. You need to turn around, get out of there, get yourself to safety first.
I appreciate everyone. I know you were answering her question. Did you get your question answered? Is there anything that you need from us?
Nope, it was a 2-in-1.
Your time. Perfect. Well, you guys, that is our time. Thank you so much for being so patient. I'm so glad that we got the conversation going. I appreciate every one of you for attending. Thank you again, San Diego Association of Black Journalists, for allowing me to host your event. Were you raising your hand, Heather?
I was like just raising the roof for you.
I appreciate
the question.
That. Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you, guys. We'll do that. Hey, thank you again so much for coming. You guys have a good night.